Did you know there was a place so rich that people called it the Golden City of America, but less than a decade later it almost disappeared from the map? Not New York, not San Francisco, not Chicago either. That is Goldfield, a small town in the Nevada desert. In 1906, there were more than 30,000 residents, 5 banks, a mining stock exchange, the most luxurious hotels in the West, and every day they mined gold worth hundreds of thousands of dollars at today's prices. Yet today, only about 787 people remain. What could cause such a wealthy city to collapse faster than it was built? Is it just a story about running out of gold? Or a warning about how wealth, power, and greed can together wipe out an entire community? In this video, we will trace the footsteps of Goldfield to discover why the town, once known as the greatest gold camp in the world, became one of the strangest and most haunting places in America. Let's turn back time to the early 20th century in central Nevada. No bustling boulevards, no luxurious hotels, not even a river large enough to sustain a town. Only the barren desert, low sagebrush, winter winds that cut through the skin, and summer heat that can scorch all hope. This is the kind of place where most people just want to pass through quickly, and no one thinks about stopping to start a new life. But then, in that seemingly worthless land, a local Shoshone discovered the first signs of gold. The news spread very slowly, from person to person, like a whisper in the desert. And sometimes, history changes just from a whisper like that. The interesting thing is that Goldfield never actually sold gold in the first place. What it sold was an idea, a promise, a dream that if you just go to the right place, dig in the right spot, your life could change overnight. Thousands of people left their jobs, sold their possessions, loaded their entire families onto horse-drawn carriages or trains to head to Nevada. Surprisingly, within just a few years, the area that initially had only a few tents amidst sandstorms developed into a city with over 20,000 residents, and at times nearly 30,000, becoming the largest urban center in the state of Nevada. What astonishes people is not the speed of construction, but the speed at which people place their trust in a collective dream. If you hear this and feel a sense of familiarity, it's understandable, because this mentality has never disappeared. Today, it might be stocks, cryptocurrencies, or artificial intelligence. Over a century ago, it was gold. Technology changes, but human emotions remain almost the same. We are always drawn to the thought that if we arrive a little earlier than others, who knows, life might turn a new page. Goldfield understands that very well. Each train bringing people here carries not only luggage, but also ambitions, expectations, and the fear of missing out on opportunities. Even many people set foot in Goldfield without ever having seen a nugget of gold. They invested in hope more than in reality. That is also the reason Goldfield grew so rapidly that it was hard to believe. In just a few years, dirt roads gave way to banks, hotels, saloons, mining, stock exchanges, and solid buildings. The city was built not only with bricks, stones, and wood, but with the belief that tomorrow would be even wealthier than today. But history often has a very interesting rule. When too many people chase the same dream, that dream begins to change. In your opinion, was Goldfield really built on gold, or on people's desire for a better life? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. And if you love little-known stories about America, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the exciting parts ahead. Because right after this, we will witness something even more astonishing. How a town in the desert tried to transform itself into a miniature version of New York in the Wild West. If Goldfield had only stopped at mining a lot of gold, perhaps today it would just be a small note in the history books. But what made all of America turn its gaze was not what lay beneath the ground, but what people built above it. In just a few short years, amidst a desert once filled only with dust and sagebrush, Goldfield began to behave as if it were a major city of the East Coast. This is no longer a temporary mining camp. This is a city that wants to prove its wealth is everlasting, and when money flows as fast as a stream of gold ore, even the desert wants to play the role of New York. The evidence is every place. Banks are springing up one after another to manage the enormous flow of money from the mines. This small town has up to 5 banks, 5 newspapers, and even a mining stock exchange, where people trade dreams faster than real gold. But it should be emphasized that all of this is happening in a place that just a few years ago was still an empty lot in the Nevada desert. If you lived in 1906, you would surely think that Goldfield was not only wealthy, but also the future of America. The clearest symbol of that ambition is the Goldfield Hotel. Inaugurated in 1908, the hotel boasted over 150 rooms, electricity, telephones, a steam heating system, and one of the first elevators west of the Mississippi River. Inside, there is mahogany wood, crystal chandeliers, gold leaf ceilings, and European chefs serving the upper class. It is said that on the opening night, champagne was poured so abundantly that it overflowed onto the steps. It's not just a hotel, it is a statement to all of America that Goldfield is not a gold mining town. Goldfield is a classy city. Such a luxurious hotel was built in a place hundreds of kilometers away from the nearest big city, as if someone decided to place a corner of Manhattan in the Nevada desert. Not only bankers and mine owners, Goldfield also attracts famous boxers, entrepreneurs, politicians, artists, and even those who just want to witness with their own eyes what is called the greatest gold camp in the world. Dozens of saloons lit up all night, restaurants always full of customers, and boxing matches attracting nationwide media coverage. Everything creates the feeling that Goldfield will continue to thrive forever. But history often has a very interesting paradox. The more a city tries to prove it will exist forever, the more it sometimes reveals a deep-seated fear that everything could disappear at any moment. What do you think? If you lived at that time, would you sell everything to move to Goldfield? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. And if you find the story increasingly captivating, take a moment to hit like and subscribe to join the channel, because the biggest secrets of Goldfield are still ahead. Because right after this, we will step into a turning point that will change the fate of this town entirely. The day the dream of a life-changing fortune no longer belongs to the gold miners, but begins to belong to those who control it. This is a very interesting paradox in the history of Goldfield. When the gold veins were still underground, the dream of a better life for the first people who set foot here began to slip away from them. Many people still think that a mining town only declines when its resources are depleted, but Goldfield tells a different story. Gold is still being mined regularly, ore cars still leave the town every day, and money continues to flow in. The only thing is, that flow of money is increasingly changing direction. If in the early years, Goldfield was the land of explorers, those who dared to bet their lives on a chance discovery, then just a few years later, it gradually became a playground for corporations and the financial elite. Is it true that the one who discovers the opportunity is not always the one who retains the reward the longest? That is a rule that has repeated itself in many resource booms in America. The small mines were successively bought, merged, and consolidated into large companies. The two most prominent names in that process were George Wingfield and George Nixon, entrepreneurs who saw what many others had not yet realized. The greatest value did not lie in mining gold themselves, but in controlling the gold mines. When most of the high-yield mines fell into the hands of a few owners, Goldfield also began to change its nature. In the past, a person could come with a pickaxe, a little capital, and hope to strike it rich. Now, to mine for gold, they have to work for the companies that own the mines. And then, in a short period of time, Goldfield transformed from a dream of gold miners into a profit-generating machine operating on a corporate scale. That is a very thought-provoking turning point. The American dream has always been told as the story of individuals who dare to take risks. But when an industry grows large enough, the game often changes. The pioneers pave the way, while organizations with greater resources come later to build, expand, and ultimately control most of the created value. This does not only happen in Goldfield, but also appears in many other fields of American economic history. Not because of a good or bad individual, but because as the scale increases, the way the economy operates also changes. From that perspective, Goldfield resembles a small laboratory for the transition to a corporate economy. At this point, the story of Goldfield begins to take a turn that very few people would expect. No foreign troops, no war, no invasion took place in the Nevada desert. But then, the soldiers still appeared. What is noteworthy is that they did not come to protect a city from an external enemy, but rather in the context of increasing tensions between mine owners and workers. As large companies gradually took control of mining operations, working conditions became harsher, and workers began demanding better wages and working environments. Strikes occurred, labor unions joined in support, and Goldfield, once a symbol of wealth, suddenly became the focal point of an economic conflict. In that context, local officials and mine owners believed the situation had become serious enough to require support from the federal government. President Theodore Roosevelt then sent troops to Goldfield to maintain order and protect the operations of the mining area. Federal soldiers were present in Goldfield for about 15 consecutive months. This detail alone is enough to show how important the gold mining town in the desert had become for the economy at that time. A place once built on hope now has to rely on military force to keep the production machine running. What keeps this story being mentioned more than a century later is not because it is absolutely right or wrong, but because it reflects a very old question that is never outdated. When economic interests and workers' rights are under pressure, how will society find a way to balance them? Goldfield was not the first place to face that dilemma, nor will it be the last. Therefore, many researchers view Goldfield as a microcosm of the industrialization process in early 20th century America, when businesses were rapidly growing and the rules regulating interests were still in the process of formation. Ironically, while the town continued to generate wealth, the optimistic atmosphere of the early days was gradually replaced by tension and division. If we look at it more broadly, Goldfield resembles a stage where the two strongest forces of the economy emerge together, the desire to create value and the need to distribute that value fairly. When these two forces run parallel, a city can develop very quickly. But when they start to fall out of sync, cracks begin to appear. Perhaps that is why many historians do not see the turning point of Goldfield starting from the flood or the later fire, but from the very period when trust between the parties began to wane. A city can rebuild its buildings, but it will be very difficult to rebuild trust once it is lost. In your opinion, during a period of overheating development, what is more important, rapid growth or building a solid foundation for everyone to benefit? Please share your perspective in the comments section. If you find stories like this help you see history from a different perspective, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support the channel, because the most surprising part is still ahead. Many people think Goldfield collapsed because the gold ran out. But in reality, when the town began to decline, gold was still lying beneath the ground. What disappeared first was the demand for gold miners. This is perhaps the detail that surprises many people the most in the entire story of Goldfield. We often think that a gold mining town will die when the gold runs out. Sounds very reasonable, but Goldfield didn't follow that script. When the city began to decline, many mines were still operational and continued to generate profits. Gold has not disappeared. What is starting to disappear is the demand for gold miners. It was a small, idealistic paradox, but it changed the fate of an entire city. The turning point came when companies heavily invested in mining technology. Large-scale ore crushing plants, especially the 100 stamp mill system, can process ore quantities many times more than the old methods. Efficiency increased, the cost per ton of ore decreased, while the number of workers needed significantly decreased. Goldfield entered a phase where the mines were still making money, but no longer needed many people to earn that money. A city that once attracted tens of thousands of workers suddenly discovered that progress was making it overstaffed. Does it sound familiar? More than a century has passed, but that story still resonates in the present. Nowadays, many people worry that artificial intelligence, robots, or automation will replace some of human jobs. Goldfield experienced something similar, except that the new technology at that time was more modern ore crushing machines. What is noteworthy is not whether the technology is good or bad. In fact, technology helps to exploit resources more efficiently and boost productivity. The problem lies in the fact that when a city relies solely on one industry, any major change in that industry can create a domino effect for the entire community. There are people who don't lose their jobs because the mine closes, but because the mine operates too efficiently. As the number of jobs gradually decreased, families began to leave Goldfield. The baker lost customers because there were fewer miners. The pub owner sells less beer. The luxury hotel is starting to have many vacant rooms. The bank is still there, but the number of people entrusting their dreams to it every day is no longer the same as before. A city is not only sustained by gold, but also by the continuous flow of people coming in. When that flow of people changes direction, the entire economic ecosystem slowly contracts. That is a very quiet kind of decline. There were no explosions, no dramatic scenes, just the lights in each window going out over the years. Perhaps Goldfield's greatest lesson is this: wealth does not guarantee sustainability. The more an economy depends on a single source of income, the more vulnerable it becomes to changes that seem very positive. In your opinion, if Goldfield had more industries beside mining at that time, would the fate of the town have been different? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. And if you find this journey increasingly captivating, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to continue following the channel. Because right after this, we will witness the final blow. The floods, the fires, and a series of events that did not kill a healthy city, but only pushed a weakened Goldfield to the point of no return. If one had to choose a moment marking the end of Goldfield, many would think of the Great Fire in 1923 or the historic flood in 1913. But that is just the ending of the film. That movie actually started a long time ago. Goldfield did not collapse in a day, nor because of a single event. It is like an ancient tree trunk being eroded by thousands of small cuts every day. When the strong wind finally came, people thought the wind had knocked the tree down, while in reality, the tree had been weakening for many years. That is also what makes Goldfield's story special. Natural disasters are not the main culprits. Natural disasters are just the ones knocking on the final door. In 1913, unusually heavy rains caused a flood to sweep through the town. Hundreds of structures were swept away. There were people who buried bags of gold under the floor with the hope of keeping their wealth safe, but when they returned, both the gold and the house had disappeared. That image has almost become a symbol of Goldfield, a city that once mined gold from the earth, only to watch the gold be swept away by water in the end, unable to do anything. But if Goldfield were still at the height of prosperity, a flood might just be a difficult chapter. The difference was that by then, the town's economic foundation had begun to waver. In the following years, the population continued to decline. Young people left to seek new opportunities, businesses closed down, hotels had fewer guests, and the streets that were once crowded with horse-drawn carriages gradually became quiet. Then, in 1923, a major fire broke out amidst strong winds, lasting for dozens of hours and destroying over 50 blocks. The sad thing is not the number of buildings destroyed, but that many people at that time no longer had enough reason to rebuild. When faith in the future disappears, even brick walls are no longer worth rebuilding. A city sometimes does not collapse due to fire, but when people stop believing that it is still worth saving. That is why today, when you walk through Goldfield, you still see the Goldfield Hotel standing silent in the desert, the county courthouse still existing, and the old school still there like witnesses refusing to leave the stage. They are like old photographs left in an album that has lost most of its pages. From more than 30,000 residents during its heyday, Goldfield today has only about 787 people living there. That number not only speaks about the population, but also tells the story of a dream that once captivated all of America, only to quietly shrink down to a tiny dot on the map. Perhaps what haunts Goldfield is not the ghost stories or the abandoned hotels. What is more haunting is realizing that a city can lose its vitality very slowly, with each store closing, each family moving away, each light dimming, without anyone noticing that they are witnessing the end of an era. In your opinion, what is more dangerous for a community? A disaster that happens overnight, or a series of small changes that stretch over many years? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. And if you are still with us, don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel, because at the end, we will explore the most thought-provoking question: why Goldfield is not just a ghost town of the past, but also a mirror reflecting the future of many communities across America. And perhaps this is the moment we should pause for a moment to ask a bigger question. Is Goldfield really just a ghost town of the past? Or is it like a mirror in which many modern communities still inadvertently see themselves? Because if we overlook the horse-drawn carriages, the gold mines, and the century-old hotels, the core story of Goldfield sounds very familiar. A place where valuable resources were found. Residents flock in. Money flows in. Houses are rising. Everyone believed that prosperity would last forever. Then the market changes, technology changes, capital flows change, people change. In just a few years, what was once seen as the future quickly became the past. That is not just the history of Goldfield. That is an economic cycle that is repeated many times in the history of the United States. Look at the bigger picture. Many industrial cities once thrived thanks to manufacturing. Many coal mining communities, oil towns, or regions that were almost entirely dependent on a single economic sector have all gone through boom and bust periods when conditions changed. Each place has its own circumstances, but the model is very similar. When all hopes are placed on a single source of income, the risks also gradually concentrate on that very source of income. The scariest thing is not that resources will run out, but that the world can change faster than an entire community's ability to adapt. At that time, the streets remained intact, but the reasons for people to stay were no longer there. The interesting thing is that more than a century after Goldfield, we are still talking about similar stories, just with different names. Nowadays, people talk a lot about automation, artificial intelligence, supply chain shifts, or the rapid emergence of new professions. Those changes open up great opportunities, but they also raise the familiar question that Goldfield once faced. What will a community do if its entire economy relies on a single driving force? Goldfield did not fail due to a lack of resources. It failed because it didn't have time to build a more diverse future when it was at its wealthiest. Perhaps that is the lesson that has kept this town valuable to this day. Therefore, when many people come to Goldfield to hunt ghosts or take photos of the abandoned buildings, they might be missing the most interesting part. The real ghosts here are not necessarily found in the Goldfield Hotel or the old tunnels. They lie within the economic lessons still echoing between the old brick walls. Each broken window is like a reminder that no city is immune to change, no matter how wealthy it once was. Today, Goldfield has only about 787 residents left, but it is no longer just a ghost town. It resembles a living museum of the cycles of American development, how dreams are built, reach their peak, and then must adapt if they want to survive. In your opinion, which community in the future will avoid this cycle, and which community is inadvertently following the path of Goldfield? Please share your perspective in the comments section. And before we conclude, there is one last thought worth pondering. Perhaps Goldfield never truly disappeared. It is just continuing to tell its story in another way, for those who are willing to stop and listen. Perhaps Goldfield never really disappeared. The gold mines may have fallen silent, the streets may no longer be bustling, but the story of this place continues to live on as a reminder that wealth can be created very quickly, while sustainability requires more than just a resource boom. Sometimes, what remains after a city is not the abandoned buildings, but the lessons for future generations. In your opinion, is Goldfield just a closed chapter in American history? Or does it still reflect the future of many modern communities? Please share your perspective in the comments section. I really look forward to reading different perspectives from you. If you love documentaries exploring history, economics, and lesser-known stories about America, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. The content in the video is compiled from historical documents, publicly available research sources, and local records for the purpose of education, exploration, and discussion. Some legends, anecdotes, or historical perspectives may not be fully verified and are presented as part of the cultural context, not as absolute conclusions. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.